Hey, get in here. Dallas is about to start.
From journalist to screenwriter, from international lecturer to artist, Melody Anderson's eclectic career path is surpassed only by her curiosity for life. After she received an honors degree in journalism, she worked for several years with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Following that, she traveled around the world and became the first woman in Australia to read a radio newscast.
Welcome to a special edition of the Ewing Barbecue podcast. This is another installment of the After the Barbecue series, where we talk with different members of the Dallas cast and family about projects and issues that they're working on and have done since Dallas. And today we are joined by Melody Anderson. And I know it says in your IMDb you were only in one episode, but it was...
Can you believe it? Just one. Oh my goodness.
you were certainly referenced a lot by Howard Keel.
Yeah, so back to the time on Dallas, it was one of the first things I did when I started acting before I did Flash Gordon. Mm-hmm. And I was so excited. It was such a big show in those days. And, I always thought Linda Gray was so beautiful, and I got to work with her, and she was just as delightful and sweet as she comes across on the show. But Howard Keel, what a force in nature that man was. Oh my God. I was very, very, very lucky to work with him.
And to step in and just, he had to take over the reins of Jim Davis, who was a legend as well on the show. And
That's right. That's right. But I got to tell you, it was such, because you got to go out to Dallas.
Right. And your episode was filmed on location, right? At
yes.
The Southern Cross Ranch?
On the ranch. Absolutely.
Which people should know is not in San Angelo. It's outside the Dallas area.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the actual ranch and the land was so stunning, as far as your eye could see, you could see the land. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. And, I was around some pretty talented, heavy actors, including, Howard Keel.
And the late Jared Martin, who passed away.
Jared Martin, God bless him. Yeah. And it was a little bit overwhelming because, as I say, I think I had done only one other show before that, which I think was Logan's Run. That was my first job ever. And I
know you did spot things. I know it says you did an episode of Welcome Back, Kotter.
Right.
Blonde sweat hog.
I was a blonde sweat hog, and I got to work with John Travolta, and he was just starting to come to his stardom at that time. But he was certainly a professional and good to work with.
And he had it rough early on. I know he was going out with Diana Hyland, and she passed away when she was working on Eight Is Enough. But,
right, and then his wife died too, which is so sad. Yeah, he's had a difficult time.
So you came into Dallas, you did an episode, and apparently you were the cure for what ailed Dusty with Sue Ellen, because...
Well, see, even then I was helping people out of their suffering. So it was an omen of my future that's what my rest of my life would be about. Absolutely.
Right. And you moved over to 5 episodes of Saint Elsewhere as Nurse Jill Roberts.
Yes. That was a lot. Again, wonderful actors. And one of them I ended up doing a film with called Boy in Blue. But and guess who was on that show? George Clooney. And George was so funny. And he was it was very interesting. And Denzel Washington. I mean, what a cast on that. And
William Daniels, who's still alive at 97.
Yes. And, Bruce Paltrow, who's passed on, but was an amazing director and producer of the show. And Jadis Rule was in it, and George was just kind of a character and kind of was bopping around, and nobody took him seriously. And I hope he's having the last laugh in his villa in Italy, because he's the one who went on, and everybody. Well, Denzel did too as well. Yeah.
And you So you did Firewalker with Chuck Norris, of course,
And Lou
Flash
Gossett.
Gordon.
Yeah, and Lou Gossett just passed recently,
Just
too.
passed. Yep, I saw him at Days of the Dead in Chicago with, was an interesting photo of himself, Priscilla Presley, Kathleen Turner, Alice Cooper, and Richard Dreyfuss together.
Oh, my God. And poor Richard Dreyfuss. Whoo! Richard, keep your mouth shut, dude.
Yeah, stay out of Massachusetts.
Yeah. Hello. Let's just talk about the movies you did. Let's keep it at that level.
Right. Seems he's in movies where things open their mouths in Massachusetts. Jaws, and then... no.
Excuse me.
And so after you did All My Children, 70-something episodes, and then you did Marilyn and Bobby, Her Final Affair. You played Marilyn Monroe. That must have been a...
That was so overwhelming, but also so exciting. I studied films and documentaries about her. And, she was a very sad woman. Her mother was bipolar and in and out of mental institutions. And, her father was long gone. And she was very bright. She actually worked with Eli Wallach in the Misfits to help him get his contract so he could get the money that he needed. I mean, she was a smart cookie. She started her own production company. But the torment of her relationships and she was sort of sadly, passed along by a lot of men. And her last...
Howard Keel at one point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I can't blame any of these men because she was so beautiful and charming. Sadly, though, her depression was so intense because of her own issues, and they didn't treat it the way they do today, with proper medications, and they have much better therapy techniques and all that sort of stuff. And, there's always this, quote, conspiracy theory around her death. But, my belief is that she took her own life because her inner pain of not ever kind of really feeling loved for her own self just took her down. And she was getting older in the business, and we know what that means. And that's why I sort of changed my path in my late 30s.
Which brought me to the next point is that after 1995, you shifted gears. So what motivated that shift, and where did you end up?
Well, it was interesting because it sort of ties in with the Bobby and Marilyn thing. Unfortunately, although, there was even talk about putting me up for an Emmy nomination, there was so much backlash on that movie because of the topic. I was surprised. I was canceled from morning shows that had been booked. Oh yeah, they're a very strong family.
Just for taking a role.
Mm-hmm. And that happens. Yeah, owie. And I was, I think, 35 or 36 at the time, and I was starting to see the writing on the wall, and I'd see girlfriends of mine who were wonderful actresses coming into their 40s and not working, and I thought, girl, you need to make sure that you're setting yourself up while you're still working to move into something else. And as everyone knows, a filming set is always full of insanity. And so I would sit and talk to people all the time and try to give them help. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I thought, hey, I can get paid doing this, telling people what to do. It's like my dream come true. So I went back to NYU and got my master's in social work, and then studied with the Ackerman Clinic for Family Treatment in New York. And then eventually came out here and worked I created the family and outpatient program at Hazelden in New York and ran their programs there. And then eventually came back to Los Angeles and got my certification. I'm certified here and in New York City, or in New York State. Okay. And started practice and also working at different clinics and sober housings here.
People start to give up on themselves, and they start to give up on their own lives. And depression is a very, very common ailment that family members suffer from. The most frustrating thing for family members is they sit there and keep thinking if they could just get it right, they'd solve it. family members who go through this are not used to reaching out for help. They should be able to figure this out on their own. And when they come here, they learn that's something they don't ever have to do again. They never again have to go through this process by themselves.
Two old drunks back in 1935 sit back. They don't know from anything. They just know that they want to stay sober. And they go back and they come up with this crazy idea. They've assimilated pieces from the Oxford group. They've assimilated information from Carl Jung about the importance of spirituality. It was Carl Jung who said that my patients who get better are those who have a sense of something greater than they are. What I tell families when they come to me is, we are in a war here. We're not fighting your child, or you're not fighting your spouse. You're fighting this disease, this war, this enemy called addiction.
Good morning, Melody.
Good morning.
How big of a problem is this?
Well, let's put it this way. For every one person who has a problem with substance abuse, 7 other people are affected. So we're talking about numbers up to 70 million people in this country are one way or the other affected by substance abuse.
What age should you start talking to your kids about alcohol?
I think the issue is what are you as a parent sending your child as a model on how to use alcohol? For example, have they ever seen you drive a car drunk? Mm-hmm. Have they ever seen you get in a car and say, you know what, I'm going to let someone else drive because that's what you do if you've had too much to drink? Have they ever seen you try to pretend like you haven't got a problem with alcohol? And most importantly, is there a family history of alcohol? This is a metabolic disease. There's a problem with the liver. The alcoholic liver does not break down alcohol like a normal liver. So it takes more alcohol to get the effect. So when you're working with parents and parents are talking to their children, if they say, oh, I can drink anybody under the table, this is not cool.
And I noticed on your website, you have a quote right at the top from Norman Vincent Peale: change your thoughts and change your world. How does that apply to what you're doing with patients?
Oh, that's a great question. Because, we come into this world, I think, pretty innocent, but depended on how we were raised and brought up, or life experiences, or being in a traumatic accident or a war or anything like that, our beliefs about ourselves start to change. I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm kind of a loser, no matter what I try, it always fails. And these are beliefs based on experiences, but they're not relevant usually with adults and in this moment. And so when one starts to look at their beliefs about themselves and realize, I always like to say that, they say feelings aren't facts. Feelings are facts because I feel them. The question is, are they based on facts? And in most cases, they're not based on facts. When that car backfires, it's a car backfiring, not a gun going off for the vet. And, I know for me, I grew up with a lot of financial instability. My dad had a lot of the isms. He was a gambler and a drinker and all sorts of things. And so we had money, we didn't have money. So I lived my life with financial insecurity. But when the thought comes up, I remember how I've always managed to rally and things have come my way. And if I reach out and ask for help, stuff always shifts. And we seem to be more grounded in the negative principles than in the miracles or the opportunities or how we manage to get as far as we have as adults. And so in shifting that belief of our own competence, our own self-worth, our own value, we start to be energized. It's like an energy force around us. We're energized to move forward and take actions to improve our lives.
And coming from the acting industry, the entertainment industry, there's obviously, it's not all glamour the way it looks from the outside. So talk about, I know one of your things you do are working with high profile clients. If you can give just a sense of what that's like from an inside the entertainment industry to someone that's outside, just some of the pressures that are felt and how you work with people on that front.
Absolutely. I've worked with directors, writers, and producers, definitely actors. And the reality is when you're on a set, it's unless it's really crazy. And I've been on a few crazy sets and they were still great because of the camaraderie between the cast and the crew. And it's like this mini family of intensity. They're, 12, 14 hours a day. And you get so close. It's sort of like being, I won't say a war zone, but it's like being in a crisis situation where everything has to move and stuff changes immediately and you have to be flexible. And then it's over. And all that sort of excitement and energy of other people and having people put dress you. And then soon you're after, excuse me.
Water break.
Water break. We've got some bad pollen out here in California. So anyway, so let me start over again. So this set is this very powerful energy of people working together for a single cause, to make this product as good as possible. And then it's over immediately. And what do you come home to? You're back doing vacuuming your own carpets. You're wondering when the next thing is going to happen. You're exhausted. And a sense of hopelessness sets in and you start going on interviews again. And then in my case, you do a project where, you do a really good job, like the Marilyn movie, but for some reason, the tide turns against the type of movie, or it wasn't such a great movie and the critics are harsh on it. I mean, it's the insecurity, the not knowing, am I good enough? You walk into a room with, 10 other actresses or actors and they're all up for the same part. And I mean, the pressure is great. And when you're doing TV, this is the crazy part. When you do up for a TV series and you do a pilot, that's the first show that goes on before the series. If it's accepted by the network, you end up having to negotiate your contract, all the money you're going to make over 7 years. Most of them, at least back in those days, was 7 years. And you see all this money and you go in and you're kind of so excited and also overwhelmed and you don't get it. And like these highs, these extreme highs and lows affect the brain chemistry and can certainly cause distress, but also, again, that hopelessness. And those beliefs start creeping again. I'm not good enough to ever get another job. Everybody's getting breaks but me. This sort of dialogue that we create for ourselves that really minimize our value and our capacity to be resilient and go, okay, next.
So it's the Charlie Brown, woe is me mentality.
Right. Exactly.
Just don't try to kick the football.
Don't kick that football with that dog. I'm telling you, don't do it. But and I must say, I don't know if I should feel bad about this, but I never had any experience with any sexual harassment. Even when I was doing Flash Gordon, I wanted to make sure that Dale Arden was, this sort of tough, liberated girl who fights back and all that sort of stuff. And I had a very, Mike Hodges was a very, very supportive director in letting us do our own work in those roles. But I never experienced sexual harassment. I mean, male actors, yeah, it goes with their territory, but you never take it seriously. And so I never experienced any of that in any of my jobs. So I feel very, very fortunate. But there have been people, men and women, who have experienced that, and it's caused damage to them and often triggered earlier life sexual abuses, and they need a lot of support and help as well.
And especially when you look at child actors that grow up and then you see someone like Jonathan Brandis, who took his life at 27, or what happened to Corey Feldman and Corey Haim with their situations.
Yeah, and how much of the addiction, because the awful thing for child actors is suddenly they're getting all this attention and they're going to all these fancy things and people telling them they're great. And they don't, when you don't really have your full brain, your thinking part of your brain formed until you're in your mid to late 20s. So they're thinking that this is the way it's always going to be. And then when it stops, which it always does, they're carrying around that kind of, I won't call it arrogance, but belief that they're special. And when that comes to an end and none of that's happening, it again, the brain chemistry, it's like such a downer that they start to get very depressed and turn to substances to at least, numb out the feelings.
Right. And you see that with someone like Aaron Carter, who just passed away
Yeah.
in 2022. Yeah. And his whole family was just a mess, and everything that's happened there. And then you see, then you had someone like, who was it, Paul Peterson, who started that.
Right.
Child actors.
Yes, he was pretty great in doing that. He certainly recognized it and went through it. And a lot of parents who let their kids get into the movies are kind of looking for another wage earner in the family. So there's often more concern about the kid being stage parents. Yeah, the kid being famous, and they live off of the fame and the money. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of betrayal that goes on as well in the families of child actors.
Right, like Macaulay Culkin's family with all that stuff too. And you could just go on and just throw out name after name. You see all the Dana Plato and Gary Coleman, all of that.
Gary Coleman, yeah. And you think about, if I was queen of the world, I would not allow child actors because it's so damaging to them.
And you have, in your practice, you deal with, says up here, lots of different anxiety, depression, relational conflicts, life and career stress, just child rearing, grief. And how do you approach that in a way? Because I know there are therapists and counselors out there everywhere. And how would you say your approach is maybe different or unique in your way you relate to people?
Well, this I really believe is every single client is a snowflake. They're all different, and they need to be respected for that difference, but they also need the techniques and treatment methods that are specific for their needs. And sometimes I mix them up. I continually, even to this day, I go to lectures. And I've been doing this since 1990. Well, I went to school in 97 and started my practice. And I graduated in 97. So I started practicing then. And I continue to broaden my scope of techniques. To me, the most important thing, though, and they did a study, this is really interesting, is that kids right out of social work school or they got their PhDs in psychology, who started working, they often had better outcomes than the people who had all this experience. Maybe they were a bit jaded, but the younger kids had more empathy and were more present with the client. And it really comes to one of these major issues of our own, sort of energy and spirits and souls, is that we need to be connected. And, if you don't have a lot of technique, being there and listening and acknowledging and validating, one of the kindest things we can do for people is to validate their suffering, or validate even if they think they see elephants floating in the sky. Now, you don't have to agree with it, but you can certainly say, yeah, that must be odd to see elephants floating in the skies. And just someone knowing that someone is hearing them. It's one of the kindest acts we could do, is to witness somebody else's pain and experience. And so that sense of not being alone, because it's in our DNA, it's very primitive. Because if I'm alone, I won't have any food, I'll be eaten by, wild animals, and I'll die. I mean, it's that ingrained into our brain that we need to have connections with other people. And what we find, and this certainly happened with COVID, and I see it so often with these, God bless them, kids on their digitals. There's no eye-to-eye physical contact or hug or touch or anything like that. And, I go to restaurants and see the whole family sitting around on their freaking phones. And
you walk down the street and people are walking like this.
Yeah, there's no one else in the world. Yeah.
I'm of the belief that if I'm walking, I'm looking where I'm walking. If someone is walking with their face on their phone, I'm not going to change my walking path to avoid them. I'm going to actually, if they bump into me, it's going to be, you need to take your face out of your phone and look
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
Or walk them into a wall. They'll go, oh, wait a minute. And then they're going to go right back to their phone.
And then they go right back to, there's no connection to the fact that they're endangering themselves. I know when I lived in New York City, how many people were killed on their phones crossing crosswalks. Because in New York, nobody stops for anybody in a car. And
it was funny. I saw a cartoon. It said, showed 2019, people were at the zoo looking at the animals that were behind bars. And then in 2020, during the pandemic, the animals are looking at the people who are in their houses like they're in the cages now. So it was like a role reversal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's behind a lot of our problems. And that's why kids go in gangs, because at least they've got a connection in a family, even if it's destructive, when that's not happening at home.
And I was watching your video on your website, which I'm going to have Mary edit in right at the beginning right at the front of the podcast. So that way we can just get a sense, because I don't want to roll it right now. We've both seen it, so we don't need to watch it over right now. But you were talking about in something like addiction, it's the behavior that or the child sees you doing something, like you get in the car and drive after having alcohol.
Under the influence, yeah.
So talk about the influence that adults have on their kids through their actions and what they pick up on that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, kids are little sponges. You know how, if you forget a kid's in the room and you swear and they're using it the next day? Mm-hmm. They're little sponges, and that's what they're supposed to be developmentally, because they're learning how to walk and talk and, take care of themselves. There was an amazing statistic that came out last week from the National Institute of Health. Between 2001 and 2010, over 321,000 kids lost their parents to addictions. I mean, it's massive. So these kids are witnessing this. There's abuse, verbal, physical, sexual. They're having to make their own, dinners and food and get themselves to school at the age of 5 or 6. I mean, it's awful. And that emptiness carries with them throughout their life and into their relationships. And they find it very hard to maintain long-term relationships, because there's always that fear that, someone's going to abandon me. So let me get out of there first before the person abandons them. And so for kids, when they're watching their parents do this, what is it? The abused become the abusers, and they just continue in this situation. Yeah, it's a cycle. Absolutely. Absolutely. And addiction is really, I think, sometimes misunderstood, because addiction is not that you do something like you smoke a joint or drink or stay on your video thing for a couple of hours, all that sort of stuff. It's that it interferes with your life. Your life starts to have more and more problems, but there's no connection that these addictive behaviors are causing this, because you keep thinking, well, next time I'll get off my computer in just 10 minutes. Well, it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that as much as you want to quit, there's a desire to get back to normal. The person can't. It's not that they won't, they can't. Certainly in alcohol and certain drugs, the body becomes so addictive, it keeps telling the brain we need more and more and more of this. And in alcoholism, it's about a liver that doesn't process ethanol the same way as normal people. And among the Indian population, the Irish population, the Russian population, there are certain cultures that really have high rates of alcoholism because of what's happening and how the body and the brain process alcohol.
So is there a underlying genetic issue in some of these? Is what you're saying?
Absolutely. The liver processes the alcohol. And what happens when someone who has an inherited liver of an alcoholic, it stays in the body longer. Mm-hmm. It's not flushed out as quickly. So it sits in the liver longer, so it causes eventually that liver damage. And it's also affecting the brain chemicals in the brain that give us give us sort of pleasure and delight, and there's immediate crash when it stops. And we know that there's dementia that comes from drinking and taking drugs. And what's really scaring me, Josh, this is my scary stuff. These kids and their friggin' dabs and their pot, what they have today here is nothing like we had in my day. Ours was like, a drop in the ocean. This stuff is so potent. We're having kids now, because their brains are still forming, having psychotic breaks and going to the hospitals at ages of 12 and 14. I mean, this is so serious. And now, if you can have a hit or here and there, that's one thing. But the potency of it, and also, as I say, with these dabs, that sort of liquid kind of thing they have, and certainly doing some inhaling through the pipes, it's so potent and serious. And we kind of, we legalized it, which I think was right. You don't hear about people on pot, being in car accidents.
And which brings into another issue, and I talked with Omri Katz, because he's in the cannabis industry now, and should it just be federally legalized so that way it has to go through the right testing process, and before it makes it to the market? And
well, then the feds would have to put, like with alcohol, you can only have this much percentage of it. And that would certainly change the business, because some of the forms, the pot, like dabs, some of the forms it comes in is really highly potent. So there would be a big backlash from the industry on that. I mean, the cat's out of the bag now. And
you wouldn't have the laced stuff on street corners that people are picking up illegally.
No. And I was just reading yesterday that they're now putting a new chemical into fentanyl that's sort of starting in your area through Pennsylvania and, sort of the Northeast area. A lot of kids are dying of this new fentanyl and chemical combination. It's just, and then you sit there and go, what the hell are they thinking? But that they're lonely, they're sad, they go up in difficult homes, they're in a terrifying time, The world is in a tough place. And that's one of the reasons why I offer my clients these skills. So when they're overwhelmed, like just right now, as I'm sitting there with you notice anything tightening in your body, like your chest or anything?
No, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So just go with me, and you put your hands right by your heart, sort of mid-chest, left side, and just notice the weight. And I have this technique called the 745, because when we're anxious, we breathe in too much oxygen and we don't get the CO2 out of our bodies. So we start to get dizzy, and that's what causes a panic attack. So what we do, instead of breathing in, you breathe out. You want to get all that CO2 out of your lungs so you make room for the oxygen. So that's a count of 7. Very gently through your nose for a count of 4, and slowly keep your shoulders down. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and stop and hold. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 as we re-oxygenate the body. And again, let's blow out that CO2 for 7. I recommend people do that, 2 or 3 times. And people immediately notice, and this takes 10 seconds. People immediately notice kind of a relaxation in their body. They're back in their heads. They're back in their bodies again, because they're getting that CO2 out.
And I noticed I was teaching a video class at a camp last summer, and I think I had seen this on a show called The Fosters a while back, where somebody had a panic attack. And I'm surprised that I remembered it, and I used it in this situation where it's something like 5 things. Tell me 5 things you see. Tell me 4. Is it
smells,
all
hear,
the way down to 1, and was able to just dial that person right back down.
Perfect.
Without having to send somebody to get another counselor or this or that, or bring them to the infirmary or whatever. It was just walk them right back down with just distracting their mind and focusing on something else.
Exactly, but
so you're familiar with that technique, right?
Oh yeah, that's in my Return to Calm skills too. That is because sometimes our anxiety provoking thoughts are unconscious or triggered, and we don't even know what's happening. We start breathing shallowly again. And what you did is you took their attention. I love using the five senses and breaking, or look for the color just blue in your room or something like that. Because your mind goes from what, even if it's an unconscious panicky thought, goes to focusing on those things. Your heart starts to slow down. And brain spotting, which I also do, moving the eyes around through the room, but going through your five senses. It's a fabulous technique. You did exactly the right thing because they're not focused anymore on whatever thought it is that's causing them that anxiety. And it's usually a thought that I am in danger.
Right. And
Fight, flight, freeze.
You talk about someone with depression. I know when Robin Williams took his life, he had a show on CBS that had just been canceled. And I always tell people that if he hadn't been canceled, he would have been working. He may have taken himself later, but he probably would not have taken himself when he did if he had been working.
Yeah. I mean, I know a couple of wonderful comics who have died, not necessarily from suicide, but drug overdoses, and worked with one. And it's just heartbreaking because the life is not funny. The pressure to perform. I mean, there's an initial high when you're performing and you're making people laugh. There's like nothing, tons of dopamine and feel-good chemicals get released in the brain. And then it's over, just like with the acting. You're back to the real world. Where's my next gig? Can I write stuff as funny as that? That self-doubt creeps in. And, with all his talent and his experience and always working and doing fantastic work, it was not enough for him to have enough belief in himself that he was worthy with or without being a comic. And it's so heartbreaking because, these comics have kind of a frenetic crash. They're frenetic and they're out there and they love the excitement of the ideas, and then they crash, and it can be very, very immobilizing for them to get back on their feet again.
And I know using a vehicle like the podcast here, we started the podcast to just go through each episode of Dallas, and then I've started to bring cast on, and they get asked the same questions after 45 years and stuff like that, so you have to do things differently, and that's where the idea of hitting on important issues. We had Cherie Wilson on. She talked about MS research.
Yes.
Big into down in Dallas. What responsibility do we have? I'll say we as being in the media and you in the entertainment industry to put the issues like this in the forefront when people want to be entertained. I know Dallas did a great job. They hit on alcoholism, addiction, rape, abortion, Miss Ellie's mastectomy, death, just all those topics. What's the right balance that you think should be had for entertainment versus pushing an issue, and should celebrities be more open with their struggles to be an example or not?
Well, it's a tough question because once someone says, I'm an addict or, addicted to this, often people's perceptions change of them. But there's so many in the industry now who come out about that. And I think it's been a help. So that, so much of, it's not just the guilt of what people did while they're, under the influence of whatever addiction. It's the shame that they have. And that gets so rooted into the soul, Fortunately, with guilt, we can fix it up and make an amend. But the shame of I'm not worthy, I'm no good, no matter what I do, as they say, it doesn't work out, all that kind of stuff. If there's not someone to talk to about it and know how normal that is and really understand, that life history and life genetics can put us in dangerous positions emotionally. I mean, certain certain artists have a high sensitivity. That's why they're so brilliant. And Robin Williams was definitely one of them too. High sensitivity to picking up other people's energies, and also just, picking up when there was something negative in the room. It's overwhelming. And if they're not given techniques and having someone to talk to work it out, they hold it inside, and then life becomes just too painful.
Right.
And so my concern, that's why one of the great things about Dallas is they did that. And a lot of family, even Archie Bunker, was out there.
That would not make it today in this politically
I
correct.
know, but addressed a lot of those issues. And I think that when you have a TV series that's successful and going on, it's a wonderful opportunity to bring in stories about your characters, if it fits with the theme of it. Like Saturday Night Live is never going to talk about addictions or,
Right.
depression or anything, but that's not their job.
And
So
Linda Gray handled it so well with Sue Ellen being an alcoholic, just the way she played her, especially when the dream season, when she hit rock bottom and she's out drinking on the streets with Lou Diamond Phillips.
yeah,
And then they dealt with issues like Down syndrome
Down
babies.
syndrome, yeah. But it was a family drama. I mean, Dallas was a
Right.
family drama. It just happened to be a very rich oil family,
Right.
but they had the same human dramas, which is one of the reasons why I had a lot of respect for the show.
Right.
And there are some family dramas out there today, but so much people are going to go to the movies to see things that are exciting and transformish and horror.
Right. They want to escape from the.
They want to escape. Yep,
And
absolutely.
in this society, I know we need to be informed of the news to some degree, but at what point do you shut it off because it is just so negative with everything going on?
Yeah. I am so happy you brought that up, Josh, because one of the things I do with my clients is I say, listen, if you want to listen in the morning, listen at night, but don't be watching the show, because they have a news cycle. They've got to keep filling up their airtime.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, sensationalism sells. But the effect on us of, adding to our own natural sense of hopelessness, if we have those issues, is the chaos in the world. And so
Mm-hmm.
I am a great believer in minimizing exposure to it, and, being aware of what are the posts and the channels that want to dig up your fear and minimize your quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the greatest things in every single spiritual and religious practice is look where you can be of service versus fearing something that you have no control over. Like, I can't control wars,
Right.
but I can send money. I can help people around me. I can hold the door for the little old man who's, struggling to get in.
Right. And that's my philosophy. I go, if there's not a mushroom cloud on the horizon, it's a good day, and just go about your own world and doing what you can to make a difference.
Yeah, and also recognizing what's working in your life. I have a practice of writing down 5 gratitudes every day.
Mm-hmm.
And when I start to get overwhelmed and funky, and, I just love self-pity. I think I have a PhD in self-pity. I go, wait a minute. Okay, let's just see and look around this room and all the things you have and your health. And, I will do that during the day. It's the greatest antidote to that feeling that life's not worthy, worth living, or, your life is horrible. We have so much to be grateful for just living in this country despite the problems. And, indoor plumbing and sewage, most of the world doesn't have that.
What do they call those? First world problems?
Yeah, first world problems, Oh, my
Right.
rent went up. Okay, well, you might have to make a change, but okay, it's not like, starving to death and not getting enough water like people in deserts and Africa and things. Yeah.
And you obviously hit on a lot of these in your counseling work. And there was
Mhm.
one interesting thing I saw. You offer marital counseling and wedding services, and specialize in counseling those in recovery and integrating the 12-step principles into the ceremony, which is something I've never heard of before.
Yeah, this is so exciting because it's a lot of couples in recovery who meet and get together and have very specific issues. There's actually a wonderful book out there, and they can check it out at Recovering Couples Anonymous, and it takes the 12 steps and does it to a couple who's in recovery and how they apply it to their honesty and their openness with each other. Excuse me.
That's that pollen.
It's I'm telling you, and 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 there are very specific issues for recovering couples. And I used to preside over some ceremonies. Now I'm doing counseling, and we'll do it again, preside if something comes up. But they're very specific for people in recovery, and they need kind of different information besides the realities of finances, kids, all those concepts, which are normal in any marital therapy, and I do that as well.
Right. And would you say you have your client base, is it range from children to all ages, or is it?
Yeah.
So
I'm really lucky. I would say my youngest client right now is 11, and my oldest client is 71. Yeah.
Oh.
So also I work with couples, and I do, and really it's a benefit and it's not a benefit. Since COVID, almost all my clients are on Zoom now, so I'm doing clients around the world.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. Is remote or in person or both? Or
I see people in person here in Los Angeles, in West Los Angeles, but people don't want to drive. And as I say, I work with a guy who is in Prague right now, and so so many of the things that I do, like the somatic exercise I gave you, and certainly some of this thing called brain spotting, which
you mentioned before. If you want to just talk about that after you finish this train of thought.
Sure. And people are in the comfort of their own homes. Mm-hmm. And I when I'm working with people on Skype as well, I always, or on Zoom or Skype, because I do that as well on Skype, is I ask them, how is this? If you're having a problem with the Skype, you're not feeling connected, let me know, so that I can make.
How would you address that if they were?
Well, first of all, I say, do you have any questions about me and my practice, or things that you'd like to know to make you feel safe doing this on Skype or Zoom?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because to some people, you're just a person on a screen, and
right,
a person. So.
Right. And also, we have on the Zoom all these fancy little backgrounds. Would it be nice if I put a background up that you'd like, or is this white good enough for you? It's white background. So they're part of this.
And I just have the cowboy hats and I was thinking of putting up the podcast banner in the back, but I can't get it to stay on the wall. So
no, but you can get one of those little pipey gizmos that can hold it up. And
that's true. Yeah, I have one.
They compact up so you can store them.
I have one in the shed for green screen. So
okay, there you go. Yeah. I would definitely do that promo wise.
Yeah. I like the there or JR and all those people.
Yeah. You want to share that.
The Larry Bird basketball and stuff. I know. Who was it? It was the woman on Knots Landing, Constance McCashin. I don't know if you were familiar with her.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, she played Sumner's wife, Laura. Mm-hmm. She left the show after 9 years, and she moved into being a therapist.
Did she really? Wow.
And she relocated somewhere in Massachusetts as well. So
yeah, a lot of actors become therapists. I mean, our whole job is to find the inner workings of our character, their psychology, their history, what makes them do what they do. So you sort of have this experience of really studying the human condition when you're playing characters.
Right. And then you have someone like River Phoenix who went into method acting for a role and stayed with the drugs until the point where he ultimately passed,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And so how do people get in touch with you personally if they want to?
Great. Well, first of all, if they want to know more about me, they can go to my site, www.counselingbymelody.com. That's one L in counseling.
Which I have up on my screen here.
Great. And then I also have a flash site, which has on it Melody's monthly messages.
Oh,
And so I talk about different emotional and mental issues that people are dealing with today. And that's just melodyanderson.com. And I have announcements in there of upcoming events that I'm going to be at signings as well.
Which you haven't completely turned your back on the industry, because
No.
you do go to these events. You were at the Hollywood show in Burbank.
It was the Hollywood show, and you were there with the Dallas group. Oh, it's so good to see Linda. Oh, I'm so happy to see everybody.
And what was interesting about that is there were, I'm going to say at least 25, because you weren't in the list of 25. And
Right.
Robert Pine was there, and he played Priscilla Presley's therapist during the Dream season.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
Kim Johnston Ulrich was on a couple of episodes. So it was more like 28 cast members there. And there were people there that had not worked with each other on the show at the same time. But
Oh, isn't that interesting?
it still felt like family. Because I know when you came over, you saw Linda. I believe I took pictures of you with Jack Scalia.
Yeah. Oh, Jack. Oh, my God, my dear Jack. Yes.
And you never acted together with him on Dallas because you had your episode. He had
Right. But we were in the same acting class.
Okay. So
And
it really felt like a Dallas family when
it is a family. It was a family. Yeah.
Because we had Omri Katz and Josh Henderson, who both played John Ross, and they had never met each other. But Josh Henderson is a huge Hocus Pocus fan, and
oh, interesting.
Omri Katz was in Hocus Pocus, and so everybody just kind of, it felt like a family reunion in a way.
Yeah, it was.
Everybody.
It really was. Yeah.
Did I get you with Christopher Atkins as well? I know I took some pictures of you with some
I think with Chris Atkins. Yes, you did. You took a picture of me with Chris as well. Yeah.
And it's just
great to see him.
So talk about just briefly before we wrap up about that experience, just being at the Hollywood show and just doing your signings and meeting people.
I've got to thank Sam Jones, who played Flash Gordon, because he's the one who got me started on these signings. He was doing it. And it is just a delight to go. I mean, I'm into, I hate saying this, 3 generations where the kid comes to my table and says, yeah, I watched this with Grandpa. Shut up, kid.
Liver spots start exploding.
Exactly. Just seeing how families could connect around the movie, because they used to play it, on Thanksgiving. It used to be a Thanksgiving movie. I always called Flash Gordon the Wizard of Oz of our times, because it was just magical and delightful, and good was good and bad was bad, and
it's funny. I don't think of Flash Gordon when I think of Thanksgiving. I think of like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles,
which is a good one too. I love that. God bless you, John Candy. Absolutely.
Edie McClurg with her line at the airport when he's ranting, and she goes, "Well, I guess you're effed." But yeah. So that's just amazing that it just
and I'm doing I wanted to announce I'm doing a signing July 26th. It's a Friday in Long Beach. Midsummer. What was the name of it again? Hang on, let me just.
I started to write it down. Let's see.
Midsummer
Scream.
Midsummer Scream in Long Beach, and I'll be there from about 4:00 on, and I'll also have my Flash Gordon pictures from Manimal. And certainly Dead and Buried, because that was a good, scary film. My face fell off on it because I actually was a zombie. Okay, I'm not going to talk about any more of that. But anyway, it was a good, creepy movie. And just to let people know, and on my site, melodyanderson.com, I also have announcements of upcoming signings as well.
And we're going to put that in the edited version of this right up there for everybody.
Great.
And there's a lot to you could talk for hours and hours and hours about different topics. So it would be great to have you just come back on whenever we pick an issue once in a while. And
I would love to do that and, talk about, certainly issues around loss and grief, situations on that first holiday without a loved partner or a pet. Our pets are our family as well. Divorce.
My dog has his own Instagram page.
He has opposable thumbs. Good for you. That's the only dog in the world.
Oh, yeah. You should see.
He's a magic dog.
And the costumes he wears when he's on
doing
holiday.
it at the cons. Well, you got to bring him next time. You come to a con and I'm there. It'd be great to see you guys.
I know I'm working with a group, Josh Henderson and Mario De La Casa, who was doing the I Dream of Jeannie bottles.
Right.
At the Hollywood show. They're working on, and it may become an annual thing. It's called the South Fork Experience, which is a 3-day weekend at South Fork.
Wow.
With the cast of Dallas. Linda's going to be there, Patrick, Cherie, Charlene, Steve, and they're going to just do a whole weekend of Ewing Barbecue and concerts.
Oh, wonderful. So it's called the South Park what?
South Fork Experience.
South Park. Sorry, that comes to my mind first.
Guys, I'm going home.
The South Fork again?
Experience.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And it's taking place October 25th to 27th this year.
Okay. Great.
And they're hoping if it goes well, they'll do it. It'll be a boutique thing on a yearly basis with different events. Different cast members would come. And
great. Wonderful.
But, so this has definitely been a very educational podcast. I hope people get something out of it. And,
I hope they do. And check out my both websites and on the Flash site, the Melody's Message. I have them all listed, all the different months throughout the year and things, and you can go back and listen to some of them. And I will continue doing them. And I'd love to come back on the show and talk about things that would be helpful to people.
You could be our official therapist.
I could be the official Josh therapist. Maybe we should just do therapy with you, Josh, and the fans would love it.
You could be the official therapist to the podcast and stuff like that. Because I know we're going to hit on some of these other topics even as the show goes on. And I know certain other cast members might come on and talk about a certain topic that I might ask you to come back for.
Great. I'd love to do that. This is great. I've had a great time.
Are there any last messages you want to send out? Anything people can do for themselves when they're at home, just in their day-to-day life? I know you've touched on
Yes. When you don't feel good about yourself, look for where you can be of service to someone else and you will feel good about yourself. That's a promise.
Excellent. And the video that I had Mary post at the beginning of this episode is on your website as well. It's the YouTube video. It's about
great
3.5 minutes long. Just some different clips that you've put together of yourself and what you're doing. And
great.
Everything. So this has been great. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ewing Barbecue podcasts after the barbecue series. We'll come up with a special name for Melody's maybe reoccurring.
We can call it "This Is Not My First Barbecue."
All these little offshoots. I feel like Taylor Sheridan with all of his Yellowstone spin-offs. But so tune in. This will be posted sometime during the summer. We're going to try to get it up before the July 26th event that you have coming up so we can publicize that. And we'll also post that information on our website and social media and stuff like that. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Ewing Barbecue podcast.
Thanks, Josh. I had a great time.